He's a man who had to, they had to explain to him the difference between the Balkans and the Baltics. His own chief of staff during his first term, General Kelly, had to explain the significance of Pearl Harbor as they were flying into Hickam Air Force Base. He thought they had to explain to him a couple of times that Ireland is not part of the United Kingdom. My daughter, when she was in fourth grade, won a geography bee where she beat seventh and eighth graders, and she knew more geography than Donald Trump did during his first term, and probably still does. And
let me tell you something.
I mean, this man has no idea what he's doing.
But let me tell you.
Welcome back to another fiery debate. Welcome back. Today we're watching Michael Knowles get challenged on the Piers Morgan Uncensored for defending the Iran war. One thing you'll notice, he never really criticizes Donald Trump for his actions. Stick around, it gets intense. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Help me reach 100 subscribers before the end of the month.
Listen, I take issue with the idea that President Trump had not thought about this. I think that claim coming from some of our panelists, I think, is absurd. President Trump had been talking about going after Iran since the 1980s. And so, yes, I'm sure Benjamin Netanyahu was lobbying him very hard to do it. And it's not anti-Semitic to say that. I also know that Mohammed bin Salman was lobbying very hard for Trump to do this. But also, this has been part of the grand strategy of the United States since at least 1979. Really, you would say since 1953, since the CIA coup that got rid of Mossadegh and consolidated the power of the Shah. So President Trump, from day one, goes in there. It's a very successful first day of the war. He says that the war is going to go on for about 5 weeks. We've just finished week 2. I myself am skeptical of the Iran operation. Had I been on the NSC, no one invited me, but had I been on it, I would have made arguments against it. But to suggest that Trump was just, befuddled and confused and duped and tricked, I think is ridiculous. Trump has the best foreign policy record of any president in my lifetime, at least, probably including George H.W. Bush, who oversaw the fall of the Soviet Union. He just keeps winning. And I think the people who have been saying for 10 years now that Trump just keeps accidentally getting it right, I think that their argument is beyond credulity at this point.
That's interesting, Michael. Has it created a sense of invincibility in Trump, which may now have tripped him up? And let me explain what I mean by that. Is that when he launched this attack, he came out immediately, very typical Trump, very belligerent. Right, we've taken out the top people. This is all over. I urge the people of Iran to rise up and take charge. It's gone. They'll never have a nuclear bomb, etc., etc., etc. But here we are 2.5 weeks later, and actually the regime is still intact. We don't know about the supposed new supreme leader, whether he's alive or dead, or whether he's in Moscow getting medical treatment. Maybe by the time this airs, there'll be more clarity on that. But we haven't seen or heard from this guy yet, the slain Ayatollah's son. But what is indisputable is that the Strait of Hormuz, which carries 20% of the world's oil every day, has been pretty well closed to everyone but the Iranians, Chinese, and a bit of Russia now for 2.5 weeks, to enormous economic damage, which will only be felt actually by a lot of Americans in a few weeks or months' time, when it is reflected in rising food prices, because every day the Strait of Hormuz is shut is going to be problematic for the food chain supply around the world. So it just seems to me that Trump may have thought this would be a quick, easy win, that militarily, obviously, the Americans and Israelis together, most formidable double act in world military firepower history against the Iranians, it's a no contest. What they hadn't factored in, and I think this is where the miscalculation has come, is the double-pronged strategy of the Iranians of effectively shutting down the Strait of Hormuz to those that didn't want to have access through it, and simultaneously attacking their neighboring Gulf states in a way that has seriously imperiled the mission statement future business plan of come and live in Dubai, come and live in Qatar, come and live in Riyadh, and it's safe and it's fun and it's sunny and everything else. Suddenly there are bombs going off in hotels, bombs going off at the Dubai airport and so on. You're seeing a lot of expats leave, you're seeing a lot of tourists stay away. This double-pronged sort of economic strategy that they've waged has been undeniably quite effective, and probably more effective than Trump calculated. I mean, do you think that's a plausible proposition?
We certainly can't say that he thought it would be over by now, because he said at the outset that it would go on for about 5 weeks. But I totally agree with you, Piers. This is the riskiest thing Trump has ever done in politics, bar none.
Look, let's be honest for a second. When you hear people like Michael Knowles say that Donald Trump had a long-term Iran strategy planned out for decades, that he wasn't confused or misled, it sounds convincing. But the issue is that the reality doesn't really line up with that. If this was such a well-thought-out plan, then why are we still weeks into this conflict without a clear outcome? The region looks more unstable, not less, and there are growing concerns about the global economy. Even Piers Morgan raised this point. At the start, Trump was very confident. He suggested the situation was under control, that key targets had been taken out, and that Iran wouldn't be able to recover. But now, things look different. The Iranian regime is still in place. There's uncertainty around leadership, and the Strait of Hormuz, which is critical for global oil supply, has been significantly disrupted. That matters, because it affects more than just foreign policy. It can have real consequences for everyday people, from fuel prices to the cost of goods. From a democratic perspective, the main concern isn't whether Trump had been talking about Iran for years. It's whether the full consequences of military action were properly considered. And at this point, it's fair to question that. Iran's response hasn't just been military, it's been strategic. They've impacted trade routes, increased pressure on regional allies, and created instability in areas that were seen as relatively secure. So when people say Trump keeps winning, it raises a valid question. Winning in what sense? Because if the economic and global consequences continue to grow, it becomes harder to argue that this is a clear success. At that point, it starts to look less like a calculated strategy, and more like a situation where confidence may have outweighed caution.
That is why I would have argued against it had I been on the NSC. However, the good that could be achieved, and don't forget this has been part of U.S. grand strategy for many decades, the good that could be achieved would be amazing. You would basically fulfill the good that began under the Abraham Accords, consolidate the Gulf states with Israel under broad American influence. You would get rid of the destabilizing force in the Middle East, Iran. You'd chop off the head of the snake. You'd back off China. You'd back off Russia. It could all be great. I'm with you, Piers. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for much longer, the Republicans are totally sunk in the midterms. One could say that the reason he undertook such a grand operation is because we only have a one-member majority in the House anyway. So if we're going to lose the midterms, might as well do something pretty big on our way out. But regardless, yes, if this works, Trump will be one of the most consequential presidents in American history. He already probably is, but he will go down truly as a foreign policy genius. If this doesn't work out, his legacy will be tarnished as George W. Bush's was. The only reason that I'm not freaking out now, I say I'm not freaking out until week 6. He said it would take 5 weeks. I'm going to freak out on week 6. I don't care how my oil futures are doing. He has a very good record. He's the only president in the last quarter century on whose watch Vladimir Putin hasn't invaded a country. His attack on Iran over the summer was excellent. His decapitation of Venezuela took 88 minutes. He dropped the Moab. He killed Soleimani. He's just done very, very well on foreign policy, which is why for now I say let him cook. However, he will be the one, along with the American people, to bear the consequences if this doesn't work out.
The only spanner in the works I would put in that argument is he didn't say 5 weeks at the start. He said it would be very quick. Then he changed it to 5 weeks when he realized it probably wouldn't be a few days like he hoped. George Conway, let me ask you a difficult question. Have you, in his entire time as President of the United States, in either term, ever knowingly praised Donald Trump for anything?
Yeah, no, I have. I mean, I have praised him for things. I can't remember what they are now because they're so few and far between. But
well,
let me
give me
just
an
say
example
this.
of where you think he's done a good. Where has he done a good thing?
I would have to go. It's hard. It really is hard.
Do you like his suits?
But you know,
his ties?
George, here's my point. George, before you answer,
no, I don't really like the ties.
Here's my point. You see, I look at this. I've always tried to be fair with Trump. I praise him when I think he's right, criticize him when I think he's wrong. I've been very critical of him last few days about Iran, but I was very praiseworthy, for example, about something that I can't imagine any American not praising him for, which is what he's done with the southern border. I mean, you know, you compare it to what happened under Biden for 4 years. Any American surely would be happy that the southern border effectively got shut down to millions more illegal people coming into the country, undocumented, illegally, into a country where millions had come in the 4 years before. I don't think that's a contentious partisan issue. It should be something where even you, George Conway, who hates the guy, can say, you know what, I'm going to hold my nose, but yes, Mr. President, I think that's a good thing.
I mean, there are times where I've held my nose and said, well, he got this one right, usually by accident. But to get back to the Iran issue, I mean, the problem with it is I hope he does get lucky. I hope, frankly, tomorrow he declares victory and everything goes back to normal and oil prices go down and he gets his victory and there's peace, at least for now in the Middle East. I don't like the Iranian regime. I wish it would go away. I don't like the fact that they probably will still try to develop nuclear weapons, although, I don't think that they're about to do that in the very near future. But I will say this, he doesn't know what he's doing. He can't explain what he's doing.
All right, this is where the debate really starts to bother me. At the beginning, Michael Knowles calls this a very successful first day of the war. But what does that actually mean? Because we're talking about reports of bombings that hit civilians, including children, with over 150 killed. Is that what we're calling success? That's a serious question. And now we're more than 5 weeks into this conflict, longer than even Donald Trump originally suggested. Instead of a quick outcome, things seem to be escalating, with more focus on the Strait of Hormuz. So again, where exactly is the success here? And then there's Piers Morgan, shifting the conversation to things like securing the border and praising executive orders as major achievements. But here's the reality. An executive order isn't the same as a law. If a president wants lasting change, they have to work with Congress and pass legislation. Otherwise, it can all be undone by the next president. That's not solving the problem, it's just passing it along. And people are feeling it. Farmers aren't happy. Consumers aren't happy, especially when it hits their wallets. So when people talk about winning or success, it's fair to ask, success for who? Because right now, this doesn't look like a clear victory. It looks like a situation that's getting more complicated and more expensive by the day.
Heard so many different rationales about how long the war is going to last, what the purpose of the war is. I mean, this is a man, remember, whose own Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, called him an effing idiot. A moron, I'm sorry, effing moron. I got to get my words correct. His own national security advisor, John Bolton, called him a laughing fool. He's a man who had to, they had to explain to him the difference between the Balkans and the Baltics. His own chief of staff during his first term, General Kelly, had to explain the significance of Pearl Harbor as they were flying into Hickam Air Force Base. He thought they had to explain to him a couple of times that Ireland is not part of the United Kingdom. My daughter, when she was in 4th grade, won a geography bee where she beat 7th and 8th graders, and she knew more geography than Donald Trump did during his first term, and probably still does. And
let me tell you something.
I mean, this man has no idea what he's doing.
But let me tell you, when I was editor of the Mirror during the Iraq War, which we deposed, we took a children's map onto the streets of New York, and we asked 100 New Yorkers when they came out of the subway to show us where Iraq was. And from memory, at least 11 put it in the middle of the United States. So let's not get too carried away here about geography.
Okay, but he's Donald. He's the president of the United States.
I know he is.
He probably wouldn't do any better than somebody coming out of the 7th Street.
A lot of people in the UK, if you ask them, probably don't know about Ireland and the complexity of the south of Ireland and the north. So this is not a thing unusual to Donald Trump, I can tell you. Shabos, how do you think this is all going to play out here? Because it seems to me, as Michael said, it's unbelievably high stakes for Trump because the midterms are coming fast. We're nearly in the middle of March here now. Then you're 6 months away from the midterm elections. He was already likely to lose the House. Big rumblings now he may lose the Senate because of this. And then he becomes pretty powerless. I mean, he got the power of executive orders, but what will happen if he loses control of Congress is the Democrats will come with everything they've got to impeach him again. He'll be swallowed up in all that legalese again. And, pretty much his effectiveness to run the country properly, as he would like to do it, disappears. So the stakes here are huge. If come June, July, this is still going on, and it's really hitting home with inflation on food prices and so on, and at the gas pump and so on, I think that this will, in the end, turn out to have been a massive mistake by Trump. Conversely, as Michael said, if somehow by then it's all played out the way he hoped, and I take George's point, I'm not entirely sure what Trump now sees as victory. Does he see total surrender? Does he see the overthrow of the regime? Does he see the people rising up? He seems to change from day to day. But what do you feel about this politically here?
Okay, so I definitely agree with your diagnosis of the problem. Like, as conservatives, as Republicans, historically going into the midterms when you're in power has never been favorable. But I totally disagree as to the causes of it. So,
all right. Now this is where the criticism really ramps up. George Conway goes all in on Donald Trump. He basically says, "We've heard so many different explanations for this war, how long it's supposed to last, what the actual goal is, and it keeps changing." Then he makes it more personal. He points out that people who worked closely with Trump, former officials, have openly questioned his judgment. And his argument is simple. If the people closest to you are raising concerns, that should matter. But then Piers Morgan pushes back. He says, "Hold on, this isn't just a Trump issue. A lot of people struggle with geography and world affairs. That alone doesn't prove much." Fair point. But then Piers shifts to something bigger, the political stakes. Midterms are coming up fast, and if this war drags on, if gas prices rise, if food prices go up, that could seriously hurt Republicans. He even suggests Trump could lose control of Congress, and if that happens, more investigations, more political battles, less ability to govern. So the pressure here is huge. And Piers makes it clear, if this is still going on in a few months, and people are feeling it economically, this could be seen as a major mistake. But if it works, then everything flips. Trump looks like he pulled it off. The problem is, no one seems completely sure what winning actually looks like. Is it regime change? Total surrender? An internal uprising? Even that part feels unclear. And that uncertainty is exactly what's driving this debate. Now here's something else to think about. If you look at Michael Knowles' YouTube channel, he sounded very confident early on, especially around the idea of a ceasefire. That didn't exactly age well. And one thing you'll notice, Michael Knowles rarely, if ever, criticizes Trump. Maybe that changes one day, maybe after Trump leaves office. But right now that pattern is hard to ignore. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Help me reach 100 subscribers before the end of the month.